Good day, everyone. I'm excited to welcome you to today's presentation titled Absolute versus Near Truth, Philosophical and Ethical Perspectives. Together, we'll explore how certainty and approximation influence the way we think and shape our moral beliefs. This topic dives deep into how we understand truth in philosophy and ethics, and I look forward to sharing these insights with you. Let's get started. When we talk about truth, it carries different meanings across various contexts. First, on the philosophical side, truth refers to how accurately statements reflect reality or facts. It's about the relationship between what we say and what actually is. Moving to the ethical significance, truth plays a vital role in guiding our moral decisions and ethical judgments. It helps us determine what is right or wrong based on what is true. Finally, it's important to recognize diverse perspectives on truth. Different traditions or cultures may see truth as something fixed and unchanging, or as something evolving over time, and this influences the conclusions they draw. The image of the open notebook with a heart reminds us that truth is something we explore thoughtfully, blending both reason and human experience. When we talk about absolute truth, we're referring to claims that hold universally. They don't shift based on perspective or context. These truths remain constant no matter where you are or who you ask. For example, philosophical truths like the law of non-contradiction, which basically says something can't be both true and false at the same time, apply everywhere and every time. Then, when we move to moral examples, you often hear statements like murder is wrong. These are seen as moral absolutes, believed to be true across all cultures and historical periods. Each of these points helps us understand the idea of absolute truth as something stable and unchanging, much like the steady balance symbolized by the scales. Let's explore the key characteristics of absolute truth. First, permanence means that absolute truth doesn't change over time or due to circumstances. It stays constant and unbreakable. Next, universality highlights that this truth applies to everyone, everywhere, without any exceptions or limitations. Then, independence from belief tells us that absolute truth remains valid regardless of what any individual thinks or believes. Finally, its foundational role shows that absolute truth serves as the basis for certain philosophical systems and frameworks, guiding our understanding of reality. Each of these aspects helps us grasp why absolute truth is such a fundamental concept. Here we're defining the concept of near truth, which is essentially about approximate knowledge. This means the claims or facts we rely on aren't absolute or final. They're provisional and heavily depend on context. Think of it like capturing the best possible understanding at a given time, often in probabilistic or approximate terms. Moving on to scientific models, near truth plays a crucial role here. Scientific theories and models help explain phenomena, but they are always open to revision as new evidence or better explanations come along. So these models reflect our closest current understanding, but they're not set in stone. Lastly, in everyday reasoning, people use near truth as the best available knowledge to make decisions, especially when situations are uncertain or constantly changing. It's about making practical choices based on what's most likely true, even if it's not guaranteed, together. Let's explore the key characteristics of near truth. First, adaptability is crucial. Near truth isn't rigid. It changes flexibly in response to new evidence and shifting circumstances. Next, context sensitivity means it relies heavily on the specific situations and environments in which it applies, recognizing that one size doesn't fit all. Then, falsifiability allows near truth to be tested and potentially disproven through experimentation, ensuring it's open to scrutiny and improvement. Finally, incremental improvement highlights how near truth evolves gradually through small, continuous refinements over time, steadily getting closer to a more accurate understanding. These characteristics collectively define how near truth remains dynamic, testable, and continuously evolving. Here, we're looking at how absolute truth and near truth differ based on several key criteria. First, certainty. Absolute truth is characterized by high certainty. It's something definitive and unquestionable. Near truth, on the other hand, is probabilistic, meaning it's likely but not guaranteed. Next, context. Absolute truth is independent of context, so it remains valid regardless of circumstances. Near truth depends on context, so its validity can vary depending on the situation. When it comes to changeability, absolute truth is immutable. It doesn't change over time. Near truth is revisable, which means it can evolve as new information emerges. Lastly, their roles differ. Absolute truth serves as a foundational element, something we build other knowledge upon. Near truth plays a provisional role. It's useful and practical, but always open to reassessment. Understanding these distinctions helps us navigate between what is definitively true and what is likely true under given conditions. Let's delve into how the belief in absolute truths shapes philosophical thought. First, it supports the idea that reality exists independently of our perceptions, meaning that things are true regardless of what we think or feel. This belief forms the basis for moral absolutism, which holds that certain ethical principles remain valid universally, no matter the context or culture. For instance, many ethical theories argue that some actions are inherently right or wrong, independent of circumstances. This perspective also provides a foundation for knowledge that is both stable and objective, giving us a reliable framework to understand the world. Plato's theory of forms is a classic example. He proposed that eternal truths exist beyond our sensory experience. Similarly, the scientific method depends on consistent truths to build a dependable understanding of natural phenomena. However, it's important to recognize the critiques as well. Critics often accuse absolutism of being dogmatic, meaning it can be rigid and resistant to new or differing viewpoints. This lack of flexibility can sometimes hinder progress in philosophy and science. So, while belief in absolute truth offers a solid foundation, it also presents challenges in adapting to evolving ideas. Here we see how confidence in a scientific model evolves over time as new evidence is gathered and analyzed. Initially, the model starts with a moderate confidence level of 50%. As early findings emerge, confidence increases to 60%, reflecting initial support for the model. However, when contradictory data appears, confidence dips slightly to 55%, showing healthy skepticism and the scientific process of questioning assumptions. Here we're looking at the concept of absolute truth in ethical reasoning, which really centers around fixed moral rules. These are absolute truths that serve as the foundation for consistent moral principles, applying universally without exceptions. Next, we have clear duties, which means well-defined obligations that provide reliable guidance for moral conduct. This clarity helps us understand exactly what is expected ethically. Lastly, there's the deontological grounding, which highlights that ethics is based on duty and principles rather than focusing on the consequences of actions. Together, these points emphasize a structured, principle-based approach to ethics that remains steadfast regardless of changing circumstances. Here, we focus on the concept of near truth and ethical flexibility, emphasizing how ethical decision-making adapts and evolves. First, contextual judgments highlight that moral responses are not one-size-fits-all. They are carefully tailored to fit specific circumstances, making them more relevant and effective. Next, we see the idea of provisional rules, where principles serve as our best guides, but importantly, they remain open to change as we gain more insight or experience. Finally, responsiveness to evidence reminds us that our ethical conclusions are not fixed. They update and improve when new information comes to light. Together, these points show how ethics is a dynamic process, always adjusting to better fit reality. Here we're looking at the fundamental contrast between moral absolutism and moral relativism. Moral absolutism holds that there are universal moral principles that apply to everyone, no matter the situation or cultural background. In other words, some actions are inherently right or wrong, independent of individual circumstances. On the other hand, moral relativism suggests that what is considered moral can differ depending on cultural norms and values. According to this view, there isn't one single moral standard that applies to all people at all times. Instead, morality is shaped by cultural context and what might be acceptable in one society could be seen as wrong in another. This distinction is crucial when we consider ethical debates and how societies navigate complex moral issues. Here we have 3 real-world case studies that illustrate how different approaches to truth can influence ethical decision-making. In medical triage, an absolute truth perspective would focus strictly on saving the greatest number of lives, following fixed moral rules without exception. On the other hand, the near-truth approach considers the specific context of each patient, striving to balance the number of lives saved with individual circumstances. Moving to whistleblowing, the absolute truth response insists on reporting any wrongdoing, regardless of potential fallout. Conversely, the near-truth approach suggests weighing the possible harms and benefits before deciding to report, aiming for a more nuanced outcome. Lastly, when cultural practices come into conflict with universal rights, the absolute truth stance rejects any practices that violate those rights outright. The near-truth view encourages seeking understanding and mediation, respecting cultural context, while still advocating for ethical standards. These comparisons highlight the tension between rigid principles and contextual sensitivity in ethical dilemmas. Here, we're comparing the relative emphasis placed on absolute truth versus near-truth across different segments. Looking at clarity and consistency, absolute truth leads slightly with 50 compared to 45 for near-truth, suggesting it provides a bit more straightforwardness and reliability. When it comes to moral guidance, absolute truth again holds a higher value at 30, indicating a stronger role in guiding ethical decisions. However, the risk of rigidity is notably higher for near-truth at 30 compared to 20 for absolute truth, highlighting that near-truth might sometimes lead to inflexibility or stricter interpretations. This chart helps us weigh the advantages and potential drawbacks of both concepts in different areas. When we talk about balancing certainty and adaptability in ethics, one of the key ideas is having stable principles at the core. These foundational ethical principles act like reliable pillars, providing consistent guidance no matter the situation. This stability is crucial because it ensures that our decisions are trustworthy and coherent across different contexts. At the same time, having a solid ethical foundation allows us to adapt our actions appropriately without losing sight of what's fundamentally right. So, these stable principles help us maintain both reliability and flexibility in ethical decision-making. Here, we summarize the key takeaways about the nature of truth and its implications. First, absolute truth is fixed and unchanging, whereas near-truth is more about approximation and depends heavily on context. This distinction is crucial because understanding it shapes how we approach knowledge and belief systems, which is what we call the philosophical impact. Moving into the ethical consequences, recognizing these differences in truth influences our moral responsibility and the decisions we make on that basis. Finally, the recommended balance is about bridging absolute and near-truth thoughtfully, staying open to nuance rather than seeing truth in black and white terms. This balanced perspective is essential for applying these concepts effectively in real-world situations. Thank you all for your attention throughout this presentation. I encourage you to explore the resources we've provided if you'd like to dive deeper into the topics we've covered. And of course, if you have any questions or want to discuss anything further, please don't hesitate to reach out. It's been a pleasure sharing this with you.